On a crisp morning in Port Charles, the air seemed to hum with memories, anticipation, and questions yet to be answered. Amid the bustle of a town always shifting beneath the surface, 4 stories quietly intertwined, each tugging on threads of the past, revealing truths that had long been buried or ignored. Jason Morgan, ever the silent guardian, found himself side by side once more with Carly Spencer. What began as a simple walk along the docks quickly became a reflective journey neither of them had expected. The fog rolling off the water was thick, almost as if shielding them from the weight of their shared past. Carly spoke first, hesitantly, about Morgan and the ache that never left her chest. Jason listened, his gaze unreadable, yet something softened behind his eyes. For the first time in a long while, they weren't strategizing or plotting, they were just 2 people, scarred by life and bonded by loyalty, remembering the many crossroads that had brought them here. Their conversation turned to the past betrayals, the near marriage that never happened, the years they'd lost and reclaimed in fragments. There was no blame, just honesty. Jason admitted he often wondered what life would have looked like if he had fought harder for them, and Carly confessed that she sometimes resented fate for always making their timing wrong. They didn't need to say they loved each other. It was in the silence between them, in the way they walked without needing to look at one another. There were no promises made, only a quiet understanding that their story was still being written, in pauses and glances, in unspoken loyalty that no amount of time or distance could erase. Not far away, in the heart of the Quartermain estate, the family and close friends of little Daisy gathered in reverence and hope. The chapel had been filled with soft light, and the scent of fresh lilies. This was a day of renewal, not just for the child, but for those surrounding her. Willow, in a pale blue dress, held Daisy gently, her hands trembling slightly as the priest began the rite. Michael stood beside her, their strained past momentarily set aside in honor of something far greater. It was Daisy's day, a symbol of purity, of second chances, of grace in the face of chaos. Each guest brought a different weight into the sanctuary, but they all left a piece of it at the altar. Sonny had arrived late, as if unsure he was welcome, but he found a seat near the back, his eyes fixed on his granddaughter. For all his sins, he knew love when he saw it, and in that moment, he saw it radiating from Daisy's tiny form. Christina and Molly sat together, arms linked, remembering their own baptisms, their own fights, and wondering how life had managed to both fracture and unite them in such strange symmetry. And somewhere in the crowd, Sasha wept silently, not from sorrow, but from the strange joy of witnessing something pure after surviving so much pain. In the holy water that touched Daisy's forehead was a promise, that the future could be brighter, that innocence still had a place in a town often stained by betrayal. Across town, Anna Devane was seated under the sterile glow of an interrogation room light, not because she was under arrest, but because her conscience demanded answers. It wasn't the WSB questioning her this time, it was herself. The investigation into recent WSB corruption had unearthed files she hadn't known existed, files suggesting her name had been attached to operations that had gone far beyond the law. A young operative had died, and someone had forged her authorization. Now the agency wanted clarity, and Anna was being forced to confront a chilling possibility that someone inside the organization she once trusted implicitly had used her as a shield. Jordan sat across from her, not as a cop, but as a friend, her voice low but firm. "Do you think you're being set up?" Anna didn't answer right away. Her hands were clasped, knuckles white. Her instincts screamed yes, but her heart was heavier than that. Because if she'd missed something, if she'd allowed her reputation to be weaponized, it meant she had failed not just the agency, but the people she swore to protect. She thought of Robin, of Emma, of every time she'd looked a victim's family in the eye and said justice would be done. And now, the scales felt unbalanced. Whether it was her past finally catching up, or someone else's agenda unraveling in her name, Anna knew she couldn't run from it. She would find the truth. Even if it broke her. Meanwhile, in the unassuming space of Rice Plaza, Chase and Brooklyn found themselves watching a street performer, a cellist whose music cut through the day with aching beauty. It wasn't part of their plan. They had come for coffee, to discuss wedding venues, and whether or not they should host Thanksgiving this year. But the music drew them in. Chase looked at Brooke, and something in her expression struck him, not just the tears in her eyes, but the realization blooming behind them. They had been moving so fast, so focused on building a future, that they hadn't taken time to ask if they were truly in sync. Brooke turned to him and asked, almost quietly to be heard, "Are we happy, or are we just doing what we're supposed to?" It wasn't an accusation, it was a question born of love, of wanting more than just surface-level joy. Chase took her hand, and for the first time in weeks, they really looked at each other. Not just as partners, but as people still growing, still healing. They sat on a nearby bench in silence, the cellist's music carrying the weight of everything they couldn't say aloud. That moment, quiet and raw, became a turning point. They weren't breaking up, not yet, but they had acknowledged something vital, that love alone wasn't always enough. That the road they were on would require more than shared smiles and mutual goals. It would take truth, and sometimes truth was messy. As dusk fell over Port Charles, each story found its temporary resting place. Jason and Carly stood quietly by the docks, the wind whispering promises they dared not voice. Daisy slept in her crib, unaware of the love that had encircled her that day. Anna pored over documents late into the night, determined to uncover a deception that could dismantle everything she had ever stood for. And Chase and Brooklyn held hands beneath a canopy of stars, knowing that while the future was uncertain, they were finally facing it together, with their eyes wide open.